Great! Wow, how exciting! It's been quite some time actually since we did an online class like this. This takes me back to the COVID years, teaching from first of all in our dining hall, because we were still working on our shala back then when we first came to Amara, and then teaching from here for some time. So it's a little bit of a blast from the past, and it's great to be able to reconnect. And to be able to share this and this web series of classes that we are doing over these weeks. So just while we give another couple of minutes for people to turn up, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Morgan. Thank you for joining, and we're coming together live here from Amara Valley, our retreat center in the north of Catalonia, in Spain. And I'm really looking forward to being able to share with you some perspectives, some information, but more than anything, kind of lenses for being able to see how we can work with our body, how we can work with our spine, and start to understand and be able to make better choices about how we move, about our yoga practice, about understanding what's going to help or hinder us, especially when we're working with limitations or pain in the body, and that's going to be part of kind of a special focus for this web series, because some form of back pain, of spinal discomfort affects almost everyone at some point in their lives these days. And a lot of that's due to our lifestyles and the forces that we put it under, but it's also just over time, and especially as we get older, it's more likely that things might become unbalanced, that different parts of the body have more wear and tear, and depending on our kind of lifestyle, our work, our yoga practice, the sports we might play, then all of these things influence how our body responds to this. So if you've just joined, but if you can mute your sound, then that would be great. Okay. Cool. Okay. So in this class and over these next weeks, I'm going to be sharing perspectives that are really deeply informed by the work that we've done with our teacher Simon Borg-Olivier, who is going to be giving the final class in the series on May the 21st. And so I just want to name him up front, as one of the founders of Synergy Yoga, which is Hatha Yoga for the modern body. It's a way of understanding how we can make our yoga more adequate, and better suited to the kinds of bodies that we develop living in the modern world, and with all of the differences that means compared to people who are living in traditional societies, where they sit on the floor a lot more, they walk a lot more, their diets are different, the physical kind of conditioning of their body ends up being really different to those of us who have grown up in the world today, and we mostly sit on chairs. We don't move our spines in the same way, and often this is actually a big component in the way that our spine is developed. Different parts that are too tense or maybe too weak, that influence the way in which our bodies and our backs feel, and that we can then try to address through some form of yoga practice or some form of physiotherapy. But that when we do, we really need to understand where we're coming from and meet ourselves there, rather than trying to impose different forms on the body with the kinds of postures or movements that might have been really, really good for people coming from more traditional societies with more natural bodies that maybe had more spinal mobility or more core strength. And just make sure that we have ways into being able to do those in a way that has a similar effect in the body, so that our yoga nourishes us, that it can heal us, that it can create a more pain-free experience, rather than through an imposition of a shape, or maybe very forceful or kind of extreme ranges of motion in different kinds of positions, which we see really commonly in yoga classes around the world these days, which might not have the effect that we actually want. So a lot of what we're going to be looking at in this class and over these weeks are ways of understanding how we can get better results from our yoga practice, especially if we're dealing with pain. So I came into doing yoga because I have a scoliosis, so my spine, a normal spine is straight this way. We have curvatures, we've got that, the lumbar lordosis and a kind of forward bend, a kyphosis in the upper spine, and that's natural for normal bodied people. And my spine grew like this, so it goes kind of in a spiral, and it created this lateral curvature that ended up causing me a lot of discomfort and pain in my teenage years and early adulthood. I had a surgery that fused together the top half of my spine, and yoga has been one of the biggest supports for me since then, over these last 20 years or so, to develop a lot more strength, to rehabilitate my body, to achieve a much greater level of comfort. I still have days where I feel sometimes discomfort or pain, but compared to what I had earlier in my life, it's just a completely different level. And so I feel like I've gained a lot from that. And the synergy yoga that we're going to be exploring was, in my experience, the most effective method for really understanding how to get good results in working with our spine. And we all have a spine. It's the key to unlocking our inner experience, the sensations. All of our nerves are going through there. The yogis talked for many centuries about the Sushumna Nadi, which is essentially that channel. And any blockages, any torsion, any limitation that we have on that ends up blocking our ability to connect to different parts of the body, to feel things sensitively, and also to express energy in our movement. So the fundamental spinal movements and understanding how to move from your spine, from the center, from your core, and how to move fluidly in those spinal movements and connect them up create a really important and powerful base for any yoga practice. Any postures, any movements that we're going to do need to involve some position or movement of the spine. And so those positions are moving through the three dimensions of space that we exist within. So if I can, let me just see, I want to share my screen, and I want to show a few images at first to give you a bit of a visual representation of what we're going to be working with as we come into practice, and then we'll also be exploring physically doing some different movements, okay? So, the first thing I wanted to show is we're moving in 3 dimensions, right? And then when we're looking at the body, we talk about these dimensions as planes of movement. So you can see here, we've got the coronal plane, which is kind of like this, straight up and down, the sagittal plane, which is straight out in front of you, and the transverse plane, which is kind of parallel to the floor. And then, so we can talk about movements in that. I wanted to show you this. We're not going to use that technical terminology that much because we want more an experiential sense of how the spine is moving, and we're going to look more at the way the spine is moving rather than the plane it's moving through. But just to start with this, it gives you that sense of like, okay, we're moving. We can go forward, back, side to side, left, right. There's up and down. And then also what I think is good about this particular diagram for this is that you can see that there are axes through the body going through the very center of those planes. So, our spinal movements then. The spine has 8 primary movements, and they're the movements that you need to know. We've got here flexion, extension, going forward and back, lateral flexion, going left and right, rotation, so twisting left and right. And then what this doesn't show, because it's often taken for granted, these are the gross movements of the body, is that we can also lengthen and shorten. So if you imagine that your spine is from here to here, I can bring my head up towards the ceiling and my pelvis down lower, and now I'm tractioning my spine out, and when I'm shortening it down, I'm not going forward, back, side to side or twisting, but it's the force kind of plane by going along that axis. And so we have 8 primary movements. They're 4 pairs of movements. So let's go through those now. Just thinking, after seeing those images, we've got like, okay, great, we're in 3-dimensional space, we'll go through things. So just think, if you stand, even if you are sitting, you can still go through these, but it's a little bit easier standing. That if you're here, I was asking for a passcode.
Yeah.
So if you're here, and you put a finger on your pubic bone or a finger on your sternum, then can you imagine them moving apart? And what will really help if you, to actually get this happening, it's very hard to feel as if your spine was actually moving. Then if you lift your shoulders right up past your ears, you can feel your spine lengthening down. But when you do that, make sure that you're not lifting your hips up. Imagine your hips are heavy, so they're like a pendulum on a string, and you actually feel these 2 points moving apart from each other in space. And this is the spinal lengthening. Now, if we were to extend further than that, if you actually lift your arms up and go all the way up into here, imagine you are hanging from the branch of a tree. And then, actually, if you let your body sag, even as you're reaching up. So if you've got a ceiling above you, imagine you're trying to touch the ceiling. If you're outside, imagine you're just reaching up into the sky, trying to touch the clouds. And then at the same time, just like we had before, imagine your pelvis is heavy and you lengthen down. Now check, can you breathe into your belly? And then if you can, that's going to release even a little bit more the muscles down around the lower trunk. So relax as much as possible. Relax your neck and shoulders, but keep lifting the shoulders up as the weight of the body's hanging down. Maybe you could imagine the crown of your head as this kind of endpoint that even goes past the spine, but is connected all the way into that line that we have coming all the way down into the back of our tailbone. Imagine that is lengthening up just as much, and you feel the point from the crown of the head to the tailbone, not just the collarbones and the pelvis moving apart, but the really, really end points of the spine moving apart. And then breathe into the belly around that. Relax everything else. Maybe relax the fingers, relax your jaw and your face. You can make little movements and just and then relax down. And just notice if you can feel that just by doing that, you feel different in your spine. So what we've done there is lengthening out also creates space, more space between the vertebrae themselves. So in those pictures before, and I think we've all seen some kind of pictures of a spine, you've got vertebrae on top of vertebrae, and what you have in between those vertebrae are discs of, mainly based of cartilage. And creating a little more space to those can in itself alleviate a lot of discomfort that might come when those discs start to get squashed for a variety of reasons. So lengthening is a really good way from here to create more space through the spine, and what that will actually do is pull blood flow into the discs. And next week Ben is going to be going more in depth about how our yoga practice impacts blood flow and energy flow in the body, and how important that is to be able to get a good result and to energize us through that. But so we've got this lengthening. Now you could do that actually literally hanging from a tree, and hanging, tractioning the spine is really, really good for it. And it can be a very, very simple and direct way of actually alleviating back pain just from this effect that we just had then of creating more space through the spine. Physically hanging upside down if you have some kind of yoga swing, or just as we did then, actually doing it through the musculature of the body and at the same time relaxing enough that we're not tensing all the way up, but creating two lengthening points to move away from each other in the top and bottom of the body, we get this spaciousness. And then the opposite of that, because all of the movements of the spine are paired, there's four main pairs, this is one, the opposite is obviously shortening. And the thing is that we don't really need to practice that because that's happening to us pretty much all the time due to gravity. And especially as we get older, this kind of compression will slowly squeeze and squash out the discs. They wear down over the years. And often when you see, very elderly people, they're much shorter, and also you see that their posture has changed as everything has compressed down. So what we start to see is, if we start to move consciously through different movements, if you every day do a bit of lengthening out, you're going to be counteracting gravity and counteracting that effect that over time you'll progressively be getting shorter, and so you can maintain more of the length and the height in the body over our lifetime. So we've got lengthening and shortening. Next up, we've got flexion and extension. And here we start to see, often when we're thinking about movements in the body, when we talk about flexion, for example, and you might even see diagrams of this, that people think that bending forward is flexion. But this is working just with the hips. Hinging is a joint here, and if you could see, I could move from my hips without actually moving my spine at all. I could keep it relatively straight. And when we do this, especially unconsciously, because the body's quite used to moving at the hips, because we sit here a lot, we sit up and down, this gets short, and the body is used to doing this kind of action because the hips have shortened a lot, that we lose the connection with our spine in the way of being able to actually flex and extend and actually create like a C shape forward for flexion and opening up for extension. In terms of extension, another point that it immediately brings up is, for a lot of us, if we do have some kind of back pain, and especially in the lower back, if we bend back, it doesn't feel good. And it's because a little bit, in the same way as we have this weaker point in the front of our hips due to sitting a lot, if your lower back has become compressed, when we sit, this gets shorter, the psoas that runs from the back of the spine into the thigh gets shorter, and so a lot of people have more curvature here than we really need. We've got bits that are compressed through the lower back and more lordosis, more spinal curvature inward this way than is really healthy structurally. And so if we just compress that more because the body is used to compressing there, then often it can cause discomfort where we're pressing too much on one or more of the discs in the lower back, or even pinching a nerve. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience of kind of doing back bending in a yoga practice or some kind of movement practice, and then after the class actually not feeling good in your back. And it's because we've overstrained a part that was already probably a little bit too weak, and not actually getting the spine to move fluidly through all of the vertebrae in the spine and create the space that it needs to get a proper opening through the front of the spine. So this is going to be, in a couple of weeks' time, we'll have Simon Borg-Olivier is going to be looking more at how to do this back bending, this spinal extension, which often can cause problems because of the modern body that we have, unless we address it in the right way. So with flexion, if you stand, once again, it's going to be a little bit easier. Here you can imagine your pubic bone and your sternum want to come closer together. And you could imagine from just above your belly button, like your belly button area moving forward and down, and the pubic bone moving forward and up. So we're really making sure that we're not just bending the spine forward at the hips, but actually we create space down around through your sacrum. You push your sit bones forward, so the bone that you can feel under your buttock, like when you sit down where the contact is, that comes forward. And imagine that your pubic bone is trying to touch up to your sternum. And you create this kind of C shape in the body. Now what you'll feel very quickly is the skin through the back lengthening and then also broadening all the way across here as you make this kind of C shape. And it might feel a bit weird, and especially if you haven't come to, if it's not very familiar for the body to be doing this, it's a really good thing to practice because it really helps to open up that space where we end up having a lot of compression from sitting a lot or from the muscles becoming short through different parts of the spine. So once we open up here, you can do the same thing. Bring the shoulders forward and down, bring the sit bones forward and up, open out through your back, and breathe into your belly. So I said this before as we were lengthening, but if you breathe into your belly, part of what it does is it means the diaphragm moves down. And just by doing that, we start to release some of these muscles around the trunk, so that any tension that might have been there, that might have stopped the body from bending that way, can release. So if you can do this, it also gives your body an internal signal to say that, hey, actually I'm relaxed, I'm okay. And just like we did extending our arms before, here, if you interlace your fingers, you can extend them forward. And once again, just making sure that I've got this going on, so I have the space down through the sacrum, through the base of the spine. You can come all the way through to there and make sure that you're not sticking your bum out like this, because you can see the shape of my spine is really different there if I get that. Here is where I'm really opening out all of the back part of the spine. So once you're here, do the same things. Can you relax the hips, your pelvic floor, your belly? You let your breath come down into the bottom. Bring the shoulders forward and down, and relax your neck, your throat, your jaw and face. If you can relax the body, that you can feel the movement expressing well, then this is when blood flow is facilitated through the body. And then relax, come back up. And just like before, if you take then a moment to check in with the body, do a quick scan. Can you feel a different level of sensitivity? The way I imagine it sometimes is like, I feel like my brain now has more vision, more image of everything that's going on in my back than it did before, and I can feel the sensations through there. And then this is really, really useful for the body to start to know, okay, how can I hold myself in a way that actually creates more right relationship between different parts of the body. Okay. So can you feel then also a difference between the back and the front of the body? So here we've got another fundamental pairing. Flexion and extension is working with the front and back of the body. And that, as I said before, when we start to go into extension, often what we do is shorten the back. So instead of doing that, try to keep that spaciousness that you just created through the back of your body. You can soften your knees, relax your hips, relax your shoulders. And now do the opposite by bringing your belly button forward and up and your pubic bone forward and down. And imagine that the front of the base of your spine is opening up. I like to imagine kind of an eye opening up and kind of vision, clarity coming out in my inner experience of the spine, and then lift up through the front of the spine so that you get this lifting, your sternum, your collarbones, your chest opening out, and this whole front part of the body getting longer. Imagine, just like we had before, the pubic bone and the sternum coming further apart, but I'm keeping my back as long and open as I can, trying to keep that sense of spaciousness that I had in the flexion while I'm opening through the front. And then the same thing here, to enhance the effectiveness and feel it a little bit more, you can interlace your hands behind your back and then use that as kind of leverage to open up even further, open up through your chest, bring your chest forward and up to the ceiling, to the sky. As you're doing this, let's just focus just on the spine. So you might be tempted to also bring your chin back to close down the back of your neck. actually try to create length through the back of your neck. So bring the chin in a little bit and relax your jaw, and keep that spaciousness even through the back of the neck, and it's going to help the body integrate that opening through the front of the spine even more. And then relax as you do. You can breathe down into your belly. Check in with yourself. Do you still have that same amount of space through your lower back? Can you let your sacrum sink down? Imagine your hips are heavy the same way as you're lifting up and forward. And just to check what the difference might be is, as you're doing this opening up through the front, if you imagine your tailbone lifting back and up, do it carefully, because for some people that might actually be really uncomfortable or could cause some of that pinching that might be causing pain in your spine. If you lift that up, you feel how different it is then, lengthening it out, letting it drop, and opening up through the front. There's a really different sense of space through the spine. Okay, so relax and come back. Relax your shoulders. And can you feel now maybe a little bit more balance in the openness between the front and back of the spine? Okay, going through. So we have lengthening, shortening, flexion, extension. And then we come into lateral flexion. So this is side bending, like we saw in the diagram before. There's a little bit the same kind of dynamic here where we could look at to bend here over to my left. I can compress this side of the body and it takes me over to here, but it means I don't have much of a sense of space on this side. But I could do the same movement of creating a curvature of the spine going that way by lengthening up through this side in a way that it just becomes longer than the other side of the body. So can you see the difference of doing that as opposed to doing that? Create the same shape, but the internal effect and the sensation of it is really, really different. So what we'd like you to do is relax your belly, and we start to see we're moving kind of from the base of the spine upwards. So if you relax your belly and your hips, imagine that the pelvis is heavy. From the point of the belly button, you could imagine that corresponds to, very closely to the base of your lumbar spine, of your lowest vertebrae. Imagine the side of your vertebrae getting more open without closing down the other side. And follow that up. Imagine each vertebrae, one by one, are becoming more open, and that the shoulder lifts up, but that you're still creating a spaciousness through the opposite side of the body. You can interlace your fingers here and lengthen all the way up. And then to go even further, if you want, you can bring your weight over onto the leg, onto the foot of the side that you're lengthening. And that way you can feel how, the spine is opening, but it's being expressed through the whole side of the body. Ground down through there, and see if you could remember what the information from all of the previous positions has given you for this. So when you come into that side bending, there might be a temptation to lift your tailbone and close down here because your body's used to doing that. But much better if you can keep that spaciousness through your lower back. You lengthen out through the side. Try not to twist the body too much, because we're going to be twisting next, left and right. And here we want to give the brain and the body information about the pure movement, so that it's got like a frame of reference for when we start to do more complex things, more complex asana or movements. It's really, really important to just get one plane at a time, one movement at a time, really clear in your nervous system. Otherwise, we start to compound habits into ways that might recapitulate tensions that are there in the body, or might continue to unbalance things in the body in a way that doesn't help feel freedom in the spine. So, once you come back, lengthen up and come down. Feel this difference between one side and the other. You feel more open, a little bit more awake, a little bit more alive through one side of the body. And part of that is getting different levels of interoception in the nervous system, waking up and feeling, wow, okay, I've got sensation here, I've got connection between the brain and different parts of the body that might have been a bit more asleep. And also that we're creating blood flow going here, as Ben is going to go into more deeply next week. we'll learn how to use that to get a much more energizing effect from the practice. So once you feel the difference between those two sides, let's balance that up. And then starting at the base of the belly, open up through the side of the body, lift one shoulder, lengthen all the way up. You can interlace your fingers again and then bring the weight over onto that side. So you feel this C shape to the side, opening up, but focusing on the opening through the side of the body. Try to keep the inner part of that curve also still open. And we can enhance that in different ways, but just focus more on the expansion, the opening through the side of the body, lengthen up through your spine. Can you still feel what we had at the beginning of the crown of the head all the way to the tailbone? Can you relax and breathe into your belly as you're doing this? All of these things inviting spaciousness, inviting relaxation into the inner experience is going to help the body integrate the information you're giving it from these really simple positions. And then to come out, we're going to lengthen up through the other side and we meet ourselves in the middle again, and hopefully that feels kind of balanced here. So finally we've got twisting, rotation around that central axis of the body. So here, once again, a little bit like the flexion and moving in the hips a lot, if the body is used to sitting a lot, if it's used to moving from the hips, then if we want to turn the body will unconsciously try to do it in the simplest way possible, and for a lot of us that's going to be moving by moving the hips because it's used to moving there. And what that does is, if I'm moving just from here, then you can see my spine itself doesn't actually create much rotation. And what I want more is, if I keep my hips facing directly towards you, and then move just my belly button, and I imagine, a little bit like before as I was imagining each vertebrae opening up, I imagine each vertebrae twisting just a little bit further, but my hips are still facing directly towards you, then my spine itself is starting to twist. So you can lengthen forward and up, so you create space through the body, and then keeping your hips facing towards me. So if you're turning to the right, you push your right hip forward and then turn your belly button around. So it almost feels like you're moving two directions at once. You can think about it. Imagine if a towel is wet and you want to wring it out, then you have to squeeze in both directions, and that's what forces the liquid out. So what we're doing in a similar way is, when you twist this way, and so if you keep your hips facing forward, your belly turns, your chest turns, the shoulders turn around, but keep looking towards me so your neck stays a bit more neutral, that when you get this twist, and then breathe into the belly, create softness through the inner body, hips relaxed, shoulders relaxed, neck and throat relaxed. What we're doing is squeezing the vertebrae relative to each other in a way that actually gently compresses the discs between the spine. And then this forces blood and metabolic wastes and different substances away from the disc, and then create space so that when we come back, if you bring your belly to the front, then your chest, then your shoulders, and come back into the center, you open up those discs again, and fresh blood flow and fresh nutrients rush in. So we're gently massaging through these movements when we're rotating in between the discs. But that doesn't happen if from here to here, I'm just moving this way, and I don't actually get any movement in between the discs. Over time, the discs there are going to become more dry. They're going to lose some of their suppleness because they're not getting that massaging effect. And eventually the muscles around those parts of the body start to hold tighter and tighter, because as far as they're concerned, this whole section, part of your lumbar spine or wherever along your spine you actually feel stiff, needs to be straight. And it becomes the new safety zone for your brain and for your nervous system. So what we want to do by doing this, let's do the other side to balance that up. What we want to do through this is to start to retrain the body to feel a safe range of motion that it goes around, okay? So interlace your fingers, open up through your back, open out through the front, lengthen up, and then just relax the shoulders and the arms and focus on keeping your hips facing towards me, facing straight forward. So you go to the opposite direction, you push the opposite hip forward, and then turn your belly, your chest, your shoulders. You can imagine each vertebrae twisting around as you go forward. Look over the front shoulder towards me, so you relax the neck. You don't need to go to any full extreme here, but just getting that sense for this basic expression of these twisting movements of moving in both directions. So like you're wringing out the spine and relax your pelvic floor, breathe down into your belly, relax your shoulders, your neck, your throat, your jaw, your face. And then to come back. Coming back is the same way as we went in, so turning your belly to the front, then your chest, then your shoulders, and releasing down. And hopefully that feels like it kind of opened up a little bit of mobility. So try moving now and just see if you move, twisting around to the side, if you open up, imagine there's like a wave going through your body, you shake out a little bit. Do you feel a little bit more limber just from doing that? Just from going through this range of like, okay, look, I'm in the center, spine is the central axis, and it goes through these basic movements. And for good spinal health, what our spine needs of us is essentially that we go through all of these movements every day, at least in some time. And a good yoga practice will do that. But what's happened is often we go through movements, or we go into positions, either with a sense of that our spine should be straight all the time, or without the understanding of seeing all of those positions we just went through and explored with our body. If you're not aware of what that might be important about that, and you just go into the paths of least resistance that we looked at around the hips, or just moving in different ways where you're moving other parts of the body rather than the spine itself, you're going to lose the beneficial impact of the movement, of the posture that you're going into, in terms of how it's actually affecting the spine. Okay? So we've got lengthening, shortening, forward and back, flexion, extension, side to side, left and right, side bending, lateral flexion, however you want to call it, and rotation, twisting from one side to another. And our spine needs us to do all of this, right? And what I'd like to point out here is, if you just took away that kind of schema of like, great, 8 movements, 4 pairs of movements, here's how they feel in the spine, here's a few tips on how to do them well. If you did that every day, and we're going to do a little practice later where we just do them in order, that would already be huge for your spinal health, for your blood flow, for your yoga practice. It's a really important foundational piece to understand, to integrate into your body. But it's looking at the spine as a string, right? It's like imagine your spine is a line, and that line lengthens and shortens, goes forward and back, and does all these things, right? But we know that our spine is not actually one-dimensional. And so I'd like to introduce a couple more concepts that can be of use. Now these are a little bit more subtle, and so don't worry about them if anything seems like a little bit too much or a little bit confusing. But one idea that comes from engineering and architecture that I think is really interesting, and it's very useful for when you're working with the spine more deeply. So I'm going to share my screen again. Where are we at? So I want to show you this. This is called a tensegrity structure. And so what you can see here there are solid beams, and this is actually a sculpture in the United States that goes way up into the air. But rather than building up the way we think of houses building, where it's like it's compressive, where you've just got lots of solid things stacked on top of each other in the right way, and then you get a strong system, a strong structure. Here, the solid parts are connected together with elastic parts, and it's between both getting the strength of the strong parts, but also the ability to distribute forces through these other more elastic parts, that actually gives a lot of strength and stability to the structure. So, how does this correspond to the spine? So, a little while ago, a clever dude called Tom Fleming started making models of vertebrae that were essentially what we just saw before. So this is starting to model vertebrae as tensegrity structures. So you can see here we've got something, made out of wood, so it's approximating some of the angles and the shapes that we get in the vertebrae in our spine. And none of those solid parts, none of the vertebrae are actually touching each other. And that's important. If you actually have a vertebrae touching another vertebrae, bone on bone in your spine, you're probably having a really, really bad time. Okay? What we want is that they're connected by these elastic parts, and in the body, obviously, those are different forms of fascia and muscles and tendons that are holding those more solid bone parts together in right relationship and can distribute forces. So this is a simplified model, but here is a more complex one then that I think is interesting to look at. Here you can actually see like the whole spine, and this has a little bit more showing all the way from the base of the spine, the sacrum. You get this lumbar curvature, you get this thoracic curvature, and you can imagine that just going further up into the neck. So we've got this model of, okay, how can we actually see the spine as a tensegrity structure, that the vertebrae are kind of floating in place and they're held together by these elastic parts, and those elastic parts hold them in one position or another according to a balance of forces around that part. So if you can imagine all of the different fascia, all of these different muscles that are going through the body, we could show you here, for example, here are the primary muscles along the spine, where you've got all of these different muscles going longitudinally, holding on in different angles to the different parts of the spine. If you think about it, all of those muscles along our back are pulling down in one direction, more left, more right, more up and down. They connect to the shoulders, they connect to the hips. All of these fascia, all of these elastic parts are creating a balance of forces, and a healthy spine has a good balance of forces around it. And what's happened to the body over the years, especially if we're feeling pain, is that those forces have become unbalanced. So I said right at the beginning, some of you might not have joined, that I started doing yoga because of a scoliosis, and a part of the scoliosis is this. We've got this lateral curvature where a part of the spine is having part of it pull too much, and another part has become lax, it becomes too long, and it's lost that balance to be able to hold straight in the center line, or to be able to, when we talk about disc herniation or compression, or the movements of vertebrae where maybe they're shearing one way or another, there's a lot of things that are very common, and maybe you have some experience of somewhere in your back, in your spine, there's been something going on where when you feel discomfort, it's lost the capacity to hold a good balance, to hold a good structure around that. And so thinking of, we've got all of this kind of structure of the body, but none of the bones are touching each other. We're held in this tensegrity, this tensional integrity of holding good forces through each other. Now, you could feel a little bit of that as we extended through and we started going through all of these movements. You start to feel you're creating a different relationship between different extremes in the body and waking up different parts. So as we go through a practice now of just linking these things together, you're going to start to see, as parts of the body wake up, as parts of the body, as parts of the spine or the back that haven't been moving so much, we ask of them a little bit more, in a kind way. We invite them to lengthen out in a way that maybe, for whatever reason, Your brain, your nervous system didn't feel safe opening into, letting a muscle lengthen a little further, thinking, no, I have to hold this steady, I have to hold it straight. You might have even received the information over the years of like, you have to pull in, all of this, to draw in your lower belly, to create a kind of corset around the body, hold your muscles strong, when you pick something out to, hold the muscles in. All of this can be great information when we need to work therapeutically, when we need to address, wow, okay, actually there's been an accident and we've got to make sure that we don't do any further damage to a part of the body or a disc. That's great. But through our lives, if we're constantly holding this compressional structure, it ends up having really deleterious, really negative effects on our internal calm, on the state of our nervous system, on our blood flow. And Ben is going to go more deeply into that next week, where he's going to give us simple techniques to open up blood flow through the body. And this is one of the most important things that you can do to create physical healing in the body. If you have an injury, if you have a part of the body that has become inflamed, if you're experiencing discomfort somewhere, then one of the main things that you want to create, that we're going to create through the practices we do over these weeks, and that in essence a good yoga practice is doing on a physical level, is creating that blood flow and bringing nutrients to parts of the bodies that need it, bringing oxygen to the cells, transporting away waste materials and maybe cells that are broken down, and all of the stuff that the body doesn't need anymore, so we don't get that kind of building up in different parts of the body, that if it doesn't get good blood flow, if we're too tense in any part of our body, and especially too tense through these muscles around the trunk, eventually these cells, these tissues are going to age more rapidly, they're going to become stiff, they're going to become dehydrated, and they're going to start to break down much more easily. And it's when we start to have much more pain, discomfort than we need. So, it comes to mind. I would like to take us through a short practice so we can feel into all of these, and we're going to do a little bit more complex forms of each spinal movement. And then we're going to learn how to link them. So we're going to just feel, okay, how do we get a more fluid movement going now that we've got a sense of like, here's all of the forms that the spine needs to do. How do we make that go in an easy way, which we're going to build on next week. But before we do so, I want to ask, like, are any questions coming up? Is there anything that you'd like to address before we go into a little bit more movement and practice time that's coming up, or any kind of comment that you would like to put in now? And of course, if it is all completely clear, then amazing. If none of this sounds controversial, then fantastic. Okay. Hi, Lou. Yes. Okay, so the practice that we're about to do of just going through these spinal positions and the spinal movements is fantastic. You can go through all of the positions once in like a couple of minutes, or you could do it a few times, do a few rounds. We're going to do a few rounds in different ways, and it can just be a few minutes out of an hour. If you did that every hour or every couple of hours, you're going to balance and counteract the load that you're putting your spine, your hips, your pelvis, your lower back under by sitting a lot. And also to think of when we sit, so I pointed out a lot before, because this flexion coming from the spine rather than from the hips is quite a classic one that we see a lot, often requires a little bit more exploration so that you get it in your body. But once you do, your yoga practice changes, because it changes our relationship with our core strength. That you can also learn to hold that balance of forces better as you're sitting and not kind of be slumping. And that just comes with time. And what I find is like that it's not about trying to hold a position. Like as you're sitting thinking like, oh, I've got to bring my shoulders back and hold this, or kind of, because anytime we're doing that from a mental state, as an imposition on like, okay, no, I need to hold a different position, it's tiring for the body. What needs to happen is that from the inside out, there's a global, there's a holistic sense of understanding where we're at in our body that can hold itself in right relationship from the inside out and can still breathe, can still be completely relaxed, because that's when we get the best blood flow, it's when we have the best energy, and it creates the most spaciousness, so that when we get up from there, we're not like, oh, I'm still stuck in the same position because the muscles are all tense, all right? But the practice we're going to do now is fantastic for just like alleviating that. And maybe if there was one more thing I would say is that you think about the position. An important concept in physical yoga practice is this idea of counter posture, right? And so if you're doing this a lot, to sit, at work, while driving, while eating, on the toilet, like so much of our lives could be seen in this position in the modern world, right? This part of the body gets really, really short. And so as we're practicing, we might want to do specific postures, which we'll do later in the series, where you can open up this part of the body, so bringing one foot back, coming into the lunge and doing this. And so we'll do actually the spinal movements in this position where we're opening the front of the hip. Doing that as a kind of counter posture to sitting could be a more specific way of working really well with that, and also can alleviate that compression. Okay. Great. So, shall we move then? If you've got space, then what we're going to do now is just start to go through. We're going to do some different movements in the order that we've done them then. We did them interlacing our fingers, and I find that this is a really good way of it. Like, it feels like you can sort of push against it. You can get more leverage in what you're doing, and it's a good way to start getting a sense of the movements themselves. But I'm also going to show you some slightly more complex versions where we're not holding that and we're moving actively into the movements. And this is something that we're going to build on these next weeks as well, looking at why active movement, which is the body moving under its own steam, not moving like by flinging one part of the body over the other, not going into the flexion just by collapsing under gravity, but by having the muscles choose to go there, having the core of the body go, okay, I can consciously take myself in, I can consciously take myself out, and I create this confidence in the body, in the nervous system, that I'm only going as far as I can actually hold, and I can come out, and I'm not putting myself in any risk, I'm not putting myself in any danger. So we create a kind of safety, an internal safety in the practice by doing these active movements. And so it's just going in all the way, and I'm going to be asking you also to flex your wrists and extend your wrists. Don't worry too much about that. Especially, you can create different sensations through the arms as we do these movements, as you extend your hands. Don't overdo it. If you feel like there's a lot of sensation comes out, perhaps when you do this position and you push your palms away, if it feels very, very tingly in any kind of unpleasant way, just do less, just relax more. And so for all of the movements that we're going to do in general, that will actually be one of the instructions, is relax more. Because one of the key things that we would like to express in the synergy method is this understanding of exactly why it doesn't work to tense too much in our yoga practice. And so to pay real special attention to relaxing more, and all of the things that I was telling you to do while we did that, just softening your belly, breathing into your belly, relaxing your neck, throat, jaw, relaxing the shoulders as you go into things, is going to really, really help your blood flow, energy flow through the body, and make sure that we're not blocking the yoga, the unification of the body, because it's very easy to do, where we're doing too much at a time, and if we tense our muscles too much, it actually ends up becoming counterproductive, okay? So, find a position where you can see me easily, and I want you to be able to face directly towards the screen. So try to make sure that you're not having to turn your head to look at the screen. Your belly button is facing me, your eyes are facing me. And then that gives you just the best kind of frame of reference for these planes of movement that we looked at from the beginning, okay? So first of all, let your hands just float in the air and relax your shoulders. Breathe into your belly, and so that means that our diaphragm is gently moving down, and as the diaphragm moves and softens, that calms the inner body. Make sure that you're not feeling tense anywhere, so you keep relaxing your shoulders, soften your knees, soften your pelvic floor and your hips. You imagine your hips are heavy, like a pendulum on a string, which is your spine, and that's hanging all the way from the crown of your head, and as if the crown of the head was kind of floating upwards. And just see if in doing that, as you breathe in and you really bring the breath down deep into you and really try to consciously let go of any tension that might be there, that you feel a kind of spaciousness. So you imagine you're floating in a warm sea, or imagine if there was just very little gravity and your whole body was floating. You could move your shoulders and just release all of this upper part of the collarbones. Relax your throat, your jaw. All these places we unconsciously hold a lot of tension. Relaxing the face, relaxing the eyes. You could even flutter your lips like And so feeling how just by consciously spending a minute relaxing all these different parts of the body, we can come into this more neutral position, this more neutral state. And it's a really fruitful way of starting and going into any movement, any position, any form of yoga practice. Is coming back into there. Okay, so let's start. We do exactly what we did before first. Interlace your fingers and relax down. Now, lengthen forward and up. Now sometimes I'll change position just so you can see a different angle, but you stay just facing directly towards me. So first of all, lengthen out the back of the body and lengthen up. Get that length down through your lower back. So imagine your sacrum, your tailbone are rooting down into the ground, your pelvis is heavy. And then keeping that length through the back of your body, all the way up into the back of the neck and the crown of the head. Breathe into your belly and feel the front of the body opening, so your shoulders are lifting forward and up. You're creating space around the back of the neck, but also lifting through the whole front of the body, and we're tractioning the spine. So once again, have that image of imagine that you're actually hanging from a tree, when you were a kid, if you played on monkey bars or a playground, and you just let your body hang. So you really feel, what is the weight of the lower body, of the pelvis? Can you breathe down into that really lower part of the body, even while lifting up and imagining that you're tractioning, hanging the whole spine. So there the breath comes through, and then release, and come down. And just let that filter through your awareness, feel the sensations, interlace the fingers, and lengthen forward. And now, facing directly towards me, bring your belly button forward and down, and your pubic bone forward and up. The pubic bone and the sternum come closer together, and you press the hands away, and you feel the back of the body open out. You can push your sit bones up towards your hands, but imagine that the middle back is opening out all the way through here. Sometimes I like to imagine, like a bear scratching itself against a tree. So just like, get in there, you can move a little side to side, just feel the back of the body opening up. And then once again, relaxing the belly, relaxing your jaw and face, breathing through it, feeling that spaciousness through your back. And then as you breathe into your belly, lift up and release. Interlace your hands behind your back. Do the same thing here. Now, feel that spaciousness through your back, just as we did before. And lengthening the arms back and away, bring your belly button forward and up and your pubic bone forward and down. And then open up through the front of the body without shortening your back. So you feel your sternum coming away from your pubic bone, opening all the way through the front, releasing back. Bring the back of the neck gently longer, relax your chin in so that your throat is soft, and open out just through the front of the body. Feel the chest opening, and you feel all of this opening through your front without needing to shorten or close the back down. You relax up into it. And then breathe down into your belly and release. And let go. And just give yourself a moment of feeling the front of the body, the back of the body, the connection between them through this center line. Interlace your hands again. Now, try doing the opposite interlace of your fingers. So, whichever feels more weird. Usually we have one way. This way seems more natural and comfortable. And then by just changing down, it can feel a little bit unfamiliar. If it does feel at all unfamiliar, it's a really good thing to practice, just to realize that we have habitual patterns of doing one side or another more. Lengthen forward and up. And then relax down into your center, soften your knees. Let the core of the body be soft and heavy. And now, bring the core, the center, just below the belly button, over to your left, and then lengthen all the way up through the left side of the body. You feel the ribs opening up, you feel that shoulder lengthening all the way up. And then bring your weight over onto that foot. Feel the whole side of the body coming. And then at the same time, just making sure, are you still open and long through your lower back? Is your tailbone lengthening down? Here, on the opposite leg that you have no weight on, you could gently turn your thigh inwards, and that creates a little bit more space around your sacrum. And you can breathe down into the base of your spine there, and feel that lengthening from the base of the spine all the way up through the crown of the head, past the crown of the head, pushing open and out. And then coming back into the center. Bring your weight onto both feet and inhale up through the other side, as if you're lengthening the opposite side up to meet in the center, and coming down. Lengthen forward and up. Without going to any extreme, just opening the spine a little bit, getting it ready in a neutral position, and then the core of the body, the belly button, over to the right, opening up through that whole side of the body, the ribs opening and lifting, the shoulder lifting, extending all the way up, and eventually bringing the weight over onto that foot and feeling this whole side of the body opening and expressing out. You can turn the opposite thigh in just a little bit, create more space around your lower back, and all the same things we've been doing. Breathe down into your lower belly, relax your throat, your jaw, and your face. And as you extend up, just keep making sure that you're comfortable, that you're not feeling too much strain or too much tension or effort in any one part of the body, but that you just feel that length and opening more than anything else. And then to come out, lift up through the opposite side, so you come back up into the center and release down, lengthen down. Okay, twisting, last two movements, lengthen forward and up. So first of all, just creating a little bit more space in the back, and especially the lower back, because we have that tendency of shortening there. Keep that open and keep your hips facing towards me. So push your right hip forward and then bring your belly around to the right, your chest, your shoulders, and look forward. So you feel yourself wringing the spine out. Now here, you can go even further. If now you release your hips and you twist the body all the way around, you realize how much you can actually rotate. To come out, relax the body, bring your belly to the front, then the chest, then the shoulders. So we bring from the base of the spine up, all the way back into the center. And relax. And we do the other side the same. Lengthen forward and up. Keep your hips facing forward. Gently push your left hip forward, and then turn your belly into the opposite direction. So you feel that rotation going all the way around. First of all, hips face forward, look forward, just the spine. And then once you breathe down into your belly, you feel the body's opening in that direction. You can turn even further the hips and the neck, relax. And bring your belly to the front, then the chest, then the shoulders. Release down. And one more time, just to finish it off, lengthen all the way up. Come back into that lengthening, that tractioning, straight up and down. But as you do so, make sure that you're relaxing your ribs in, you let your pelvis be heavy, lifting all the way up, and release down. So we took a little bit of time with that. You could just do one round of these movements, and already, perhaps I hope that you can feel that just doing these simple movements opens up a new space in the body. Maybe you feel different sensations. I feel already quite warm because it creates blood flow in the body by the way that we're moving, and we're going to go, as I said, more in depth on that next week to understand how we can facilitate that blood flow aspect of the practice. As you relax, we're going to go through this and we're going to start flowing between the positions a lot more. So we're not going to interlace the fingers now. So follow my movements, all of the same things. Come back into center, soften your knees, your hips, relax your belly, relax your shoulders and your hands and fingertips, relax your neck and throat, make little movements, relax your jaw, your lips, your face, you can blink your eyes, and swallow. Okay, so here, bring your hands into the front, backs of the hands together, so that you create more openness in the back. Now, come all the way up through the back, lengthen all the way up, lengthen up through the front, until your hands, fingertips up towards the ceiling, all the way up. And you could stay here, or maybe you could even lift the heels up, and then come back down. Bring your belly button forward and down, pubic bone forward and up. Curl the spine forward, so from the base of the spine, from the core of the body, flexing forward. Now roll your shoulders forward and flex your wrists so your fingers are pointing back towards you. Push your sit bones forward and make that C shape in the body, and then stay here, or maybe even lift your heels. Only lift your heels if your balance feels really good. If it's not, better to just stay down, but just open up through the back of the body here. Breathe down into your belly, and then release. Come back into the center. Keep that openness through your back in the way we've been doing. Belly button forward and up, pubic bone forward and down, and open up through the front of the body, from the base of the spine, up through the heart, open out your collarbones. Now, roll your shoulders out, gently press the palms away, and extend your wrists so your fingers are pointing down towards the floor. Only as far as feels comfortable. And feel that opening through the whole front of the body. Lower back long, tailbone down. You can stay here, or you lift up the heels and feel that opening through the whole front of the body. And then bring the heels down. Inhale the hands back up, lengthen up, and come back down. So someone's to be. Bring the hands down, relax the body in the center. Bring your core of your body over to the left. Lift one shoulder and bring the elbow over the head. Bring your fingertips together and then lengthen all the way up and bring the weight over onto that foot. So you feel this. Now we're pushing one shoulder up, one shoulder down, lengthening towards the floor and the ceiling at the same time, and we create even more of that lengthening, compressing one side now a bit more and opening even more strongly into the other. So come out from here. Keep that length all the way through your left side. Come into the center. And as you breathe in, lengthen up through the right side, all the way up to meet yourself in the center and come down. So we create space in the body and then we maintain that space rather than going in and just collapsing back down. Feel the difference between the two sides of the body. Come back into the center. Bring your core over to the right and then open up through the side body. Fingertips together. Separate your shoulders, arms and hands, one up, one down, and then bring your weight over onto the side, open up the side of the hip through that way, and feel that length through the whole side of the body, just as we did before. Keep that length all the way through your right side. Come to the center, soften your knees, and as you breathe in, lengthen up through the opposite side to meet yourself in the center. Come back down into the center. And twisting. First of all, keep your hips facing forward. Turn your belly around to the right, then the shoulders, and then from the center of the body, lengthen out into the fingertips. and bring your shoulders around into the twist. So your front arm is kind of trying to bring the whole body around. You lengthen all the way out into your fingertips, but are the hips still facing forward? Relax and soften your hips, lengthen down through your tailbone and push that opposite hip forward. Before finally turning all the way into the hips, turning all the way around, and then bring your belly to the front, bring your back arm around and hug around the chest. Lengthen up through your back, and then open out through your front. And finally, lengthen up through the spine, and come back down into the center. So a little bit more complex movement that has benefits we'll go into over these next weeks. Other side, final movement. Keep your hips facing forward, belly to the left, then the chest. You imagine vertebrae by vertebrae turning, and then extending from the center out to your extremity. First of all, just focusing on the spine, and then turning all the way around the hips, the spine, even the neck, and then belly to the front, chest to the front, hug around to the front. Give yourself a big hug and feel how much you're opening your upper back as you lift up. Open out through the front of the body. Lengthen up, lift the shoulders up, feel the spine long, and come down. And coming back to that first movement, lengthen up through your back, up through your front, long through the front and back of the body, through the sides of the body, all the way up, maybe even lifting the heels, and come down. Okay. We're going to go through more fluidly now, one more time, just like that. And instead of saying so much, I'm going to click. So, after I click, you do the same movement. Lengthen up. Come down. Flex forward. All the way rolling in, flexing the wrists. Open up through the front of the body, come straight into the extension, lengthen out, extend the wrists all the way up, opening the chest, opening the heart. Come back into the front. Lengthen up. Come down. Lengthening up through the side. Opening out. Weight onto the other foot. Coming down. Up through the center. Back to the center. Other side, lifting the shoulder. Fingertips together. And lengthening up. Over onto the side, weight on one foot. Into the center. Up. And back down. Hips face forward. Turn. Extend out. And turn the whole body. Come back, hugging around into the center. Open out. And lengthen up to come back to neutral. Turn the other way. Coming back, hugging. Lengthen up through the spine. And down. Final movement here. Lengthen all the way up, make yourself nice and long, crown of the head long, fingertips rising up, maybe even lifting the heels. Come down, bring your hands to the crown of your head, to your forehead, to your mouth, and to your heart. And then bring one hand on your heart and one hand on your lower belly. And soften the front of your body under your hands. Soften your belly and breathe down into your lower hand. You feel the heartbeat. Feel the warmth of your body. And feel subtly the movement of energy, of sensation, of blood through you, warmth. Thanking yourself for just taking a little bit of time today to do some easy things to facilitate that life process going through you. Let a breath come in, let it out through your mouth, relax your jaw like a sigh. And let the hands come down. And just like we started, feeling like you're floating in an easy way, all the joints soft, feeling the breath move through you, and just observing how do you feel in that central channel, this axis that your spine is expressing. What sensations are there? What sense of spaciousness? Can you feel perhaps a sense of the breath moving through it? Let go. Thank you. Namaste. Thanks for taking a little bit of time to try out some of these things. They're so fundamental